Imagine you are standing on the very edge of a colossal precipice, staring down into an abyss so profound, so utterly vast, that it could easily swallow Mount Everest whole and still leave kilometers of dark, freezing water above its snow-capped summit. You are looking at the Mariana Trench, a massive, crescent-shaped scar in the Earth's crust that plunges nearly 11 kilometers into the absolute darkness of our planet. To physically descend into this ink-black void is to leave behind everything that makes our world familiar, embarking on a journey into a purgatory of absolute, unrelenting hostility. As you sink deeper, the warm, sunlit blue of the surface water slowly decays, shifting into a dull, cold grey, before being completely swallowed by a thick, velvety blackness at a depth of 1,000 meters. The descent takes hours, confined within a claustrophobic steel sphere suspended in a silent, freezing universe. Past the twilight zone, past the abyssal plains, you enter the Hadal Zone, a realm defined by extreme, almost unimaginable deprivation. Here, the ambient temperature hovers just above freezing, stalling indefinitely between 1 and 3 degrees Celsius. The hydrostatic pressure reaches a crushing, terrifying 1,000 atmospheres. This is a physical force roughly equivalent to having several commercial jumbo jets resting directly on every single square inch of your fragile body. A pressure so immense that a single microscopic crack in a submersible's hull would cause it to implode in a fraction of a millisecond. Down here, there is absolutely no sunlight to drive the life-giving process of photosynthesis, no changing seasons to signal the passage of time, and no warmth. For decades, scientists comforted themselves with the assumption that such a hostile, high-pressure desert would be completely sterile, populated only by a few dormant, microscopic scavengers. This comforting belief was shattered in the mid-20th century, when the bathyscaphe Trieste made its historic plunge, proving that life could somehow survive in the dark. Yet, every single time we send our advanced robotic submersibles into this dark trench, the Mariana Trench reveals something that completely shatters our fundamental understanding of biology and physics. Scientists are not just fascinated by this place, they are quietly, deeply terrified of it. They are terrified because the Mariana Trench operates on a set of hidden biochemical rules that seem completely alien, actively defying the natural laws that govern the rest of our planet. By the end of this journey, you will understand the exact, unsettling discoveries that have turned this deep ocean trench into the ultimate scientific enigma, and why the most isolated sanctuary on Earth might hold the keys to a dark, unfolding global catastrophe that connects our sunlit world directly to the monsters in the dark. To comprehend why this place induces such a profound sense of scientific dread, you must first look at the sheer, destructive power of the physics at play. The pressure of 1,000 atmospheres is not merely a passive force that squashes empty spaces. It is a chemical weapon of mass destruction that fundamentally alters the very properties of water itself. Under normal conditions on the surface of the Earth, water molecules form a stable tetrahedral network of hydrogen bonds. But beneath 6,000 meters, the immense weight of the water column squeezes these molecules so tightly that it distorts their hydrogen bonds, forcing the liquid into a dense, unstable state. This pressurized water is incredibly aggressive. It does not just crush tissue, it actively forces its way into the intimate, microscopic structures of living cells, invading the folded shapes of proteins, the very machinery of life. It disrupts the delicate bonds that keep them folded, causing them to denature, flatten out, and stop functioning. which kills the cell instantly. Furthermore, as you descend past 5,000 meters, you cross an invisible, deadly chemical boundary, known as the carbonate compensation depth, or the CCD. Below this line, the extreme pressure, near freezing temperatures, and high concentration of dissolved carbon dioxide make the seawater so aggressively acidic that it acts as a highly effective chemical solvent. It literally dissolves calcium carbonate, the very material that marine creatures use to build their shells and skeletal structures. The rate of calcium carbonate supply is perfectly balanced by the rate of its dissolution, meaning that below this threshold, shells cannot accumulate on the sea floor. They simply dissolve. According to all known rules of physical chemistry, any shelled creature that descends into this acid hell should have its protective calcium carapace dissolved, leaving its soft tissues to melt alive on the muddy floor. And yet, when our deep ocean cameras finally breached the bottom of the Challenger Deep, they did not find a sterile, skeletal desert. Instead, they captured a thriving, highly active ecosystem, dominated by creatures that have bypassed these lethal physical and chemical constraints, using methods that border on science fiction. The trenches are not empty. They are ruled by highly specialized, resilient, and utterly bizarre organisms that have weaponized their own biology to conquer a habitat that should have obliterated them in a heartbeat. To understand how this is possible, we must pivot our focus away from the crushing darkness and look deep within the cells and genetic codes of these deep-sea survivors, where the true paradigm shift occurs. The first massive shock came with the discovery of a tiny crustacean, an amphipod called Hirondelia gigas, thriving in abundance at the very bottom of the 11-kilometer abyss. In an environment where the acidic water below the carbonate compensation depth should have instantly dissolved its shell, scientists discovered that this creature is a biological alchemist. It consumes the organic sediment of the seafloor, and using unique sugar compounds in its digestive tract, it extracts aluminium ions directly from the ingested mud. When these ions are excreted and contact the alkaline seawater, they form a self-healing gel of aluminium hydroxide that completely coats the animal's exoskeleton. This metal-based armor creates an impenetrable chemical shield, preventing the aggressive acidic water from ever reaching and dissolving its delicate calcium shell. This is the first known creature on the planet that literally mines the seafloor mud to forge a suit of metal armor. But the genetic deconstruction of the Mariana snailfish, Pseudoliparus swirei, is perhaps even more unsettling to evolutionary biologists. To survive at depths of over 7,000 meters, this vertebrate had to completely dismantle its own anatomy on a genomic level. Genetic sequencing has revealed that the snailfish permanently deactivated its osteocalcin gene, known as BGLAP, which is responsible for bone mineralization and skeletal development. This deliberate genetic mutation leaves the snailfish with an open skull that is not fully closed, and bones made of soft, flexible cartilage that can bend under pressure without snapping. It has completely lost its pigmentation genes, turning into a transparent, blind ghost, with its translucent skin exposing its internal organs to the cold water. To prevent its cell membranes from turning into a solid, frozen wax under the crushing weight of the water, the snailfish expanded its AKA1 gene to 15 copies, producing massive quantities of unsaturated fatty acids that act as a biological antifreeze, keeping its cells fluid and alive. It even mutated its critical chaperone proteins, inserting a single, precise amino acid swap that locks them into shape, preventing them from crumpling under the weight of 1,000 atmospheres. These physical alterations show that vertebrate life is far more plastic than we ever realized, adapting to the extreme cold and pressure by turning its own anatomy into a fluid, cartilaginous ghost. But the true, creeping terror of the Mariana Trench lies not in these ghostly fish, but in the invisible, microscopic empire that controls the sediment on the seafloor. When scientists analyzed core samples retrieved from the bottom of the Challenger Deep, they discovered a hidden, hyperactive virosphere that defies all known ecological principles. Within the cold, toxic mud, researchers identified more than 1,600 novel viral species, and more than 77% of these viral genera have never been encountered anywhere else on Earth. These are perfect, ancient biological machines that have evolved in absolute darkness, completely isolated from the rest of the biosphere for millions of years. They do not merely exist, they actively rule this ecosystem through a brutal process known as the viral shunt. These hadal viruses infect and rupture up to 35% of the bacterial population every single day, spilling their nutrients back into the sediment to feed the survivors in a resource-scarce desert. But the most chilling discovery is how these viruses actively manipulate their hosts on a cybernetic level. Their genomes are packed with auxiliary metabolic genes, such as cis-C and cis-H, which they use to reprogram the DNA of infected bacteria. The viruses force the bacteria to process sulfates, creating thiol compounds that neutralize the heavy metals, like mercury and arsenic, that accumulate in the trench sediment. They even carry genes to artificially thicken and cement the cell walls of the bacteria with complex polysaccharides, building a microscopic armored shield for their host, so it is not crushed by the pressure before the virus can finish replicating inside its flesh. And this mechanical, alien-like coordination extends to the macroscopic world. In 2014, scientists recorded a mysterious acoustic anomaly near the trench, known as the Western Pacific biotwang. It began as a deep, animalistic moan, but abruptly transitioned into a high-frequency, metallic, and cybernetic screech. For years, it terrified researchers who could not explain its mechanical nature, fearing it was some form of military hardware or an artificial beacon. Eventually, AI algorithms traced the sound to a population of Brooder's whales. In the boundless, silent void of the deep ocean, these animals had to completely warp their own organic voices, turning them into industrial sirens just to pierce the darkness and find each other across kilometers of empty water. These discoveries prove that the Mariana Trench is not a silent tomb, but a hyper-connected network of microscopic manipulation and mechanical-sounding acoustic broadcasts, where viruses play the role of cybernetic architects. As we look upon these terrifying discoveries, we must turn the dark mirror back upon ourselves and confront a sobering, immediate truth. The Mariana Trench terrifies scientists because it proves that life on Earth is far more interconnected and far more vulnerable than we ever dared to imagine. We have spent centuries looking outward at the stars, dreaming of alien biology on distant moons, entirely blind to the cybernetic viral empires and metal-armored alchemists thriving 11 kilometers beneath our feet. These creatures have spent millions of years in the quiet, stable cold of the abyss, perfectly calibrating their genomes to the constant, oxygen-rich polar currents that feed the trenches. But that ancient stability is being violently dismantled. The greenhouse gases we release on the surface are rapidly warming the oceans, and this unnatural heat is inexorably creeping downward, threatening to disrupt the global thermohaline conveyor belt. As the poles warm and glacier ice melts, this conveyor belt slows, restricting the vital oxygen supply to the deep. The deep ocean is quietly, slowly suffocating. A silent, invisible tragedy that is completely hidden from our eyes. The very traits that allowed these magnificent creatures to conquer the extreme pressure, their large, oxygen-hungry bodies and their delicate biochemical balances, are poised to become their fatal vulnerabilities. A warmer, oxygen-depleted abyss simply cannot support them. The monsters in the dark are completely defenseless against the invisible changes raining down from a sunlit world they will never see. The ultimate terror of the Mariana Trench is not the creature with the open skull, the metal-armored crustacean, or the mechanical cry of the whale. The ultimate terror is the realization that our careless actions on the surface can reach down through 11 kilometers of water into the most isolated, extreme sanctuary on Earth, and quietly suffocate the giants in the dark, erasing a world we have barely begun to comprehend, leaving us to stare into a silent, dead mirror of our own making, where we are the ones who turned off the lights.